you, unless you're on a beach somewhere for Memorial Day weekend, be in church next Sunday because it's going to be a powerful conclusion to this message. Have you guys enjoyed this series on Enough? We've gotten so much feedback, so much insight. Man, people are saying, I needed this, I needed to hear this. But then the following weekend, I really want to make sure that you're here for that Sunday. It's going to be a powerful Sunday, a dynamic Sunday, a lot that we want to communicate and share with you. And so just make sure you block that. Like, don't look past next Sunday. But make sure, especially, you're not only here next Sunday, but the following Sunday as well. Exodus 4. I do this funny thing. I'm just going to be really vulnerable with you. I do this funny thing every morning. I set my alarm 30 minutes early so I can hit the snooze button 3 times. Anybody else just, hey, come on, all right. I like you guys. I do that. Like, there's something about it that I don't know. I know I'm not getting an extra half an hour sleep. Like, I know I'm still getting the same amount of sleep, but there's something just incredible about being able to hit that snooze button again and again and again. Why? Because like you, I want more sleep, right? I want more sleep. But more than wanting more sleep, what I want for you is to be able to end the thinking that you're not enough. We've been in this series now for a number of weeks because I realize that we all have moments, we have seasons. Maybe you're there right now where you find yourself in a place thinking, I'm not enough. I made a mistake, I had a failure, I got caught up in something. Or maybe someone just told you, they told you you were not enough. And we live with this thinking that we're not enough. And as your pastor, as someone who believes in you and cares about you, I want that thinking to come to a conclusion. I want you to put that to rest. I want you to put that to death. One of the most powerful questions that we can ever ask as an individual is this question of what if? What if? And just like a coin, this what if question really has 2 sides to it. It has one side that what if the worst outcome happens? What if fear, right? If this happens, what are the outcomes? What if I miss it? What if I fail? What if I don't achieve what I was hoping to achieve? What if I swing and I miss? What if I strike out? What if I ask her out and she says no? There's all kinds of what ifs when it comes to fear. There's another side though. There's the what if that comes in faith. God, what if you do the very thing you said you were going to do? What if you deliver on the promise that you gave me? What if you fulfill the very thing that you set out to do? God, what if? And there's a risk. There's a risk to both sides of it. But I want us to be people that live by faith, not by fear. I want us to be people that live with that intention. That intention. Jesus said some of his final words in John 14. He says, peace I give you, and peace I leave with you. He didn't create us. He didn't leave us to be left in fear. He says, I'm coming so that you can have faith and be people of great faith. I believe this. I believe that your destiny, depends on how you respond in faith or in fear to the what if question. Your destiny, my destiny, it all comes down to how are we going to respond. Are we going to live by faith or are we going to live by fear? Now listen, you might be watching online today. You might be here in the service and you might be saying, Ezra, I walked in with fear. I've been battling fear in this season. Fear is my propensity. Fear is kind of my default. Listen, I want to encourage you, if that is the case, that's okay. Because we serve a God that helps us overcome every fear we could have. Listen to this, Exodus chapter 4, verse 2. Then the Lord said to him, God is talking to a man named Moses. And it says this, then the Lord asked him, what is in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down to the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. Now, this is powerful. God takes a stick and he turns it into a stake. And then God says, Moses, I want you to reach back out and I want you to grab that same stick, that same staff. And he does. He grabs it by the tail, which is not how you want to grab a snake, right? Listen, for any of you that are new to Texas, we do have snakes. And everyone hyped it up on me when we moved here 10 years ago. They said, you're going to have all kinds of encounters with snakes. I've only had a few, and they always involved some kind of high-power weapon that I chose to engage the snake, garden snake in my backyard. But listen, you're going to run into snakes. It's just part of it. But you never want to grab the snake by the tail. That's what Moses does, right? It's the most dangerous thing. But here's what's key in this, and this is what you have to see. It wasn't that Moses suddenly had this newfound willpower. It was the reality that he witnessed the power of God. See, we think that in order to overcome fear, we need to kind of just kind of create and cultivate just this willpower within us. Like if I can just like stir up enough willpower, then I can face my fears. God says, no, I'm inviting you just to be a witness to my power. I'm inviting you to be a witness to everything that I've already done. Open your eyes. The things I'm doing right in front of you, that's what I'm inviting you to experience and to see. And that's what Moses experienced. It's the first of many miracles. One of the greatest leaders in all of the New Testament is this guy named Moses. Yet in this moment, he can barely lead his father-in-law's sheep. And God says, through my power, Moses, I'm going to develop you into a great leader. I'm going to lead you as you lead almost 3 million people out of 400 years of slavery. God does something so significant through Moses and in Moses. But Moses battled the question. He battled the question, am I enough? Am I enough? God, am I enough for you? Am I enough to lead your people? Am I enough to leave this job that I have and to walk out into the unknown, to ask the what if question? God, am I enough for that? I love what Psalms tells us in Psalms 139. God says, David says, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. The psalmist is telling us that we were made in the image of God. And not as an accident. Not as just kind of so. You were made in perfection in the image of God. The things that you don't like about yourself, they were still made in the image of God. The things that you look in the mirror and you're like, I just wish I could change that, or I could tweak that, or I wish there was a pill for this. All those things are perfections, are imperfections. All those things are made in the image of God. And we can take one of the most monumentous steps that we could ever take in our lives when it comes to answering the what if question, when we come back to who God is and how God created us to be. He created us to be fearfully and wonderfully made. Listen to this, verse 6. Then the Lord said to Moses, now put your hand inside your cloak. And he was wearing this kind of like overcoat, like shacket kind of thing that we see a lot of people wearing today. And he puts it in. So Moses put his hand inside his coat. And when he took it out again, his hand was as white as snow with a severe skin disease. Now put your hand back into your cloak, the Lord said. So Moses put his hand back in, and when he took it out again, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. The Lord said to Moses, if they do not believe you and are not convinced by the first miraculous sign, they will be convinced by the second sign. God is so good. He's so good. He says, Moses, I'm going to go with you. Moses, I'm going to go with you, and you're going to get to see my power. Moses, you're going to get to see my power. I'm going to go with you. And man, the whole nation is going to be transformed. Moses, the whole nation is going to be brought into freedom. Moses, I'm so good that as I'm with you, I'm going to do things that are going to blow your mind and everyone else's. I'm going to perform such signs of power. And it's interesting to me that God did it first with Moses. God could have said, Moses, I'm going to go with you. You got this, buddy. You know, tap on the back. I'll see you on the other side, right? Like a really bad baseball coach, right? God's not like that, you guys. He says, I'm going with you, and Moses, I'm going to give you a prequel. I'm going to give you a preview of what you're going to see. And he shows Moses these two miracles. A stick that turns into a snake and a healthy hand that gets filled with a disease. And then God brings him back. He brings back both things. A snake and a disease are things of evil. God says, I want you to see my power. Moses, I want you to see the power that I have, and it's more powerful than other powerful things. A snake is powerful, a disease is powerful. Both those things can kill you, but I want you to see my power. Now, here's what I think is really interesting. Here's where I want to go today. Most of the versions of the Bible believe that this skin disease that Moses had was a disease known as leprosy. We don't deal with leprosy anymore. We've had the cure for it. Once in a great while, you'll hear about someone having it again. But back in that day and age, back in the day and age of Jesus in the New Testament, it was one of the most feared diseases anyone could have had. What would happen is it was a skin disease. It would begin to eat away at your skin. At first, it just kind of looked like white and kind of pustulous, which is one of the most disgusting words that we could ever say. And then it gets worse. We think about skin disease and we think, oh, like acne, right? Like we read this and we think about acne, and I'm instantly brought back to those traumatizing moments as a middle schooler where it looked like my face just went from like normal one day to I was beyond recognition. And my mom would buy this medication called these pads called oxy pads. You guys remember that? Anybody had oxy pad? Oh, like I can smell it right now. It's that bad. It's that disgusting. And what would it do? It would dry out your whole skin, right? So that the acne would go away. And I don't know what kind of chemicals were in this. I don't know what was worse, the burn of the oxy pad or just having acne. We read this and we think, okay, this is what Moses had. He just had some really bad acne, right? He just ate a year old with some acne, right? It could happen. But he had leprosy. And leprosy was so bad because it would eat away at your skin. And what would happen, and I don't mean to be too graphic, but eventually your bones would deteriorate. Your fingers would begin to fall off. Your toes would begin to fall off. Parts of your face and your body would just come to the point where they would fall off. Leprosy was so feared that they didn't just have a disease. If you had leprosy, you had a title. They called you a leper, right? They called you a leper. You had this title. And you didn't just have a title. You didn't just have a disease. Guess what? You had a whole place that you lived. You couldn't live in normal society. You had to live in this place called a leper colony. How bad is that? Like, some of you right now, you're facing different diseases, but you're still here at church or you're watching online. For these people, they had to be removed completely from society. And there were rare moments when they would come into society and they had to put it in our terms, they had to socially distance. Remember in 2020 when we didn't know what was going on? And remember when you would go into the grocery store and I remember one day I'm in the grocery store and I have a mask on, I have a couple masks on, and I have gloves on. Because I'm like, I have to get food, and there's a guy walking by me in a gas mask. Like, no joke. And you're thinking that's extreme, but go back to 2020. Nobody knew what was taking place. And this guy was like extra careful, extra cautious, right? And remember how we had to socially distance, and if you get too close to someone, they would kind of like run away from you, you know? And like look at you and maybe say something to you. This was every day. That was, 12 months, 18 months. Every day of their lives. And to make matters worse, they had to announce themselves every time they came into a room. They didn't announce themselves saying, hey, I'm Ezra Stanton. I'm a husband to Kendra. I serve as the pastor of Mission Church. No, they had to announce this every time they came into a room. They had to shout this phrase, unclean, 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 unclean. It'd just be nicer if you just said, I'm a leper. Hey guys, I have leprosy. No, you have to shout something that is mentally defeating. I'm unclean. So lepers literally would die a slow death. But they wouldn't just die a slow death physically. They would die a slow death mentally, emotionally, relationally. They were in isolation. They had to announce themselves as unclean. You know what leprosy was? Leprosy was a disease of rejection. It wasn't just the disease, you were now rejecting the person. I think you could argue in the Bible and in those times, leprosy was really the pinnacle of rejection. Now think about this, and this is why I bring it back to Moses. God could have shown his power in any kind of way. He does it with a staff. He could have done any kind of thing. He could have said, Moses, put your hand into your coat and bring it out, and there's going to be a ball of fire. There's going to be a lightning bolt. All kinds of creative ways that God could have said, I'm going to show my power. God chose leprosy. Why? There's a lot of schools of thoughts, but here's one. Here's what I've been thinking about for a while now. I think God chose leprosy, this disease of rejection, because God wanted to overcome Moses' rejection. I think God brought about a disease that was known as rejection, and then God said, as he pulls his hand back out and he's healed, God says, I'm going to heal you of your rejection. You see, Moses didn't have leprosy, but guess what? Moses had been living like a leper for so long. He'd been in the desert for 40 years. He'd been serving his father's sheep for 40 years. He'd been dealing with rejection for 4 decades. You know how many days that is? That's 14,600 plus days of rejection. Remember, Moses tried to overthrow Pharaoh. He tried to kill an Egyptian. He tried to take the law into his own hands. He tried to lead his own revolution for the people of God. And what happened? God's people rejected him. Exodus tells us this in Exodus 2:14. It says, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Rejection. You're not our leader, Moses. What are you doing? Why are you trying to lead us? We don't know you. We don't want you to lead us. Rejection. And then he runs away. And he spends 4 decades living as a nomad reject in the desert. I think God allowed Moses to have this disease for a moment and then to heal him of it, because God says, Moses, I want you to know that I'm the God over rejection. I'm the God that's going to help you overcome your rejection. I wonder when the light bulb moment was for Moses. I wonder if it was in this moment. I wonder if it was down the road. I wonder when that moment was for Moses, when he realized the rejection I've been living under for 40 years of my life is no longer going to be a part of my future. I don't have to hold on to it any longer. It's not going to be a part of me. We all go through rejection. For some of you, if you've been fortunate enough to live 40 years, maybe just like Moses, you've been carrying a rejection for 40 years. Maybe someone told you, maybe one of your parents told you, maybe someone else told you that you were a mistake, and since the day you could understand that, you've been holding on to that your entire life. I want to ask you to do something just in this moment to help you kind of focus. Would you mind just closing your eyes? I just want to read a couple of phrases of rejection that came to me, and maybe these would hit home for you. Maybe it's this, that you're not talented enough for that elite preschool. Sorry, you're not fast enough to be on my flag football team. I'm going to pick so-and-so. Sweetie, your artwork is good, but it's just not good enough for the art show. Your science project, well, it was a good effort. You failed. I'm sure we'd have fun at prom, but I'm going to go with, this was a really good interview, but we're going to hire someone else for the summer position. I'm sorry you didn't make the team. You didn't make the band. Thanks for applying, but you're just not whatever university material. You're great. You're just not what we're looking for in a candidate. You're really sweet, but you just don't match our culture. It's not you, it's me. The ring is beautiful, but I just don't envision us spending the rest of our lives together. We like you, but your kids are just a little too much for us to hang out with on the weekend. You're too old. You're too young. You're too inexperienced. You don't look the type. You don't fit the mold. You're not fit enough. You're not attractive enough. You're not smart enough. You don't qualify for the loan, for the mortgage, for the life insurance policy. In every season of life, perhaps in every week, we go through these moments of rejection. Moses wasn't the only one dealing with rejection. You and I aren't the only ones dealing with some form of rejection in a given season. Yet far too often we hold on to this rejection. And I'm not saying I don't do it, because I do. But think about this. We accept the thing that rejected us. We hold on to the thing that did not hold on to us. We literally just wrap ourselves and our identity around something that wanted nothing to do with us. That place, that position, that purpose, that person. And they say no, and for some reason we decide to coddle that and to care for that and to tattoo it upon our arm or upon the cerebral cortex of our mind. We hold on to these things even though they never wanted to hold on to us. We accept our rejection. And it makes no sense, does it? And I'm here to tell you today that we need to be people that reject our rejection. We need to be people that when we've been rejected, we say, okay, thank you, and then we move on. We move on from the situation. We move on from the place. We move on from the person. We move on from the rejection, the moment of rejection. We need to be people that move on from that. Here's what I'm convinced of. Moses could not go back to Egypt until he dealt with his rejection. And you can't walk into the purpose, into the destiny, the things of God, until you deal with that rejection. That rejection can't come with you. That rejection is holding you back. We need to reject our rejection. We need to reject the you're too old. We need to reject the you're too young. We need to reject the you're not what we're looking for. We just need to make the choice to say, hey, I'm going to reject this because it's not who God called me and created me to be. Now, I know for some of you, like Ezra, that rejection is the motivation that keeps me going. That rejection is the fire inside. It's Michael Jordan not getting picked to play varsity that made him into the great basketball player that he would. Like that rejection is my fire, it's my fuel, it's my passion. I'm going to show them. I would push back and say, maybe, but I think there's a better way to live. If that fire is already inside of you, it's already inside of you. You don't need the fuel of rejection to increase that fire. Just ask God to continue. Just ask him to increase that purpose and that passion. We have to let it go. We have to give it to God. In the next few moments, I want to look at two things. I want to look at why we need to do this, and then how we do this. How do we reject this rejection? Why? Why is it so important? Why spend time even talking about this? Here's why. Because God accepted you. God accepted you. And if God has accepted you, there's no rejection in the world that you need to hold on to. If the Almighty God says, I look at you and I accept you, and I look at you and I look at you, I look at you, I look at that entire back section. Never wants to sit in the front. I get it, but I love you. You're accepted. You're accepted. You're accepted. If God has accepted you, nothing in the world's rejection even matters. We've been talking about this, right? Well, when Moses comes to God, he says, who are you? God says, what? He says, I am who I am, right? He says, there are no equals, right? It's that equation that there's God and then there's no equal. There's nothing on the other side of the equation, nothing at all. Nothing is equal to God. And so if God says, I accept you, nothing else is equal to God, so no other rejection should be worth holding on to. Now, I know we still hold on to rejection, and rejection stings, and rejection hurts, and I'm with you. My wife and I were on a date last night, and I said, hey, what moments of my life Should I share in terms of just moments of mass rejection? I was thinking about sharing this one. She goes, no, you can't share that one. I'm like, okay, maybe down the road a little bit. She goes, yeah, down the road a little bit. It's still kind of too fresh. I said, okay, setting that one aside. She goes, you could share this one or this one or this one or this one or this one. And like, we're just driving down 35. I'm like, man, I've had a lot of moments of rejection in my life. I've had a lot of moments lately of rejection in my life. Man, I could share so many with you. I could preach till like 9 o'clock tonight, just stories of rejection. You don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to deal with it. Man, that's what my counselor's for. We all go through rejection. But God says, I've accepted you. I've not just accepted you. I've accepted you as my son. I've accepted you as my daughter. Wednesday night in our men's group, we were talking about this, how the people of Israel cried out to God. It says that God heard them. And that's why he's sending Moses, right? Now, we have an advantage because we're not just the people of God. We're the sons of God. We're the daughters of God. Because of Christ and this relationship with Jesus, we're now brought into this new identity, an identity as sons and daughters of him. We've been accepted. We've been created, fearfully and wonderfully made. Not just created, but unconditionally loved. And that is why we must reject any other form of rejection in our lives, because God says, I've accepted you. That's the why. Now here's the how. A month ago, I got invited to an event in Austin, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I'm like, hey, this sounds cool, I'll go. And there was a woman speaking. Phenomenal. Absolutely remarkable story. She was a newscaster, and she, one day on air, had a breakout of some rosacea. And the producer immediately began to, in her ear, he's like, hey, you have something on your face, you have something on your face. And she just had this flare-up of the skin condition. Her face went really red in this one spot. And she got off the air and she tried to cover it up and nothing worked. And so she set out to find a makeup brand, a cosmetic brand that could cover her rosacea, and she discovered that one didn't exist. And she loved being a newscaster, but it was in that light bulb moment of her life where she decided, I need to start a cosmetic company to deal with this. And so her and her husband on their honeymoon wrote the business plan. And they set out and they created a product and they improved it and they improved it and they improved it. And they quit their jobs and they decided, this is what we're going to do. It's more than just a company. It's a calling. It's a purpose. We want to help women that are facing these kinds of issues. And they created this product and they sent it off to the first makeup company to see if they would sell it. They had a website that was launched, but the sales weren't moving like they needed to. They sent it off to a company, and the company looked at it and they said, this is great, but no. And they got so aggressive. They sent out hundreds and thousands of samples to makeup companies all over the world. And then she got an interview at Sephora. She flies to California. Guys, Sephora is one of the biggest makeup distributor companies in the country. And she flies out to meet with the people in Sephora. And she does the pitch. And she's so nervous, right? She's like living on her last couple of dollars. And this woman from Sephora, she said, the whole room was eating out the palm of my hand. And this one woman was just eyeing me up and down. And finally she said, we're not going to buy this. You're not what we're looking for. She said, can you unpack that? And she said, women in the beauty industry look flawless. They're 20-year-old makeup, they're 20-year-old models with flawless skin. You're not what we're looking for. She left Sephora and just got around the corner and just started bawling. But she knew greater than the no was the knowing. And she continued to do it again and again and again. And finally, she got to interview with Ulta, and Ulta said no. And then she went to QVC, and QVC said no. And then there was this private equity firm that found out about what they were doing. They said, hey, we're interested in what you are doing. And here are the last 5 companies that we've helped take from mom and pop in their living rooms to great successes. And they met with them. And they presented, and they said, we think this is a fit. And so her and her husband flew out. And they flew out, and they met with the board. And at the end of the meeting, the board said, you have a great product. You have a great message. But ultimately, our answer is no. And she said, can I ask you a question? She's standing from me to this stand right here, to this investor, and she said, can I ask you a question? Why? And he got real nervous, he got real awkward, and he said, you're just not the face of the beauty industry. She goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, your skin's not flawless, you're overweight, you're not what the beauty industry is looking for. My answer is no. She said she went home for 3 days and cried and prayed and made the decision to continue. A few months later, she got invited to QVC. Now, I don't watch QVC. Maybe you do. I didn't know anything about it. But in order to get invited back to QVC, you have to sell all of the units that they ask you to sell in 10 minutes. And they have it down to a science. If you don't sell a certain number of units by like minute 1, minute 2, they just move on from you. Like they go off the air and they switch to something else. They took their life savings, what little bit they had. They bought all the units that they had. They ended up going on QVC. And guess what? Sold out. They sold out everything they needed to sell. They got invited back and back and back and back. The last year they were on, they did 256 episodes in a year of their product. They became the largest boutique makeup brand in the country. Bigger than MAC, bigger than, help me out, I don't know. You're a makeup artist, I don't know. Bigger than all of them, right? And guess what happened? Revlon said, we want to buy you. This woman's name was Jamie Kern-Lena, and she sold her company to Revlon for $1.2 billion. She became the CEO of Revlon, the first time they ever had a female CEO ever. Now, here's why I tell you this fascinating story. I'm listening to this woman speak, and she said 2 things about rejection that I've never heard before, and I thought, I have to share this with Mission Church. I have to share this. I'd already formulated this message, and as she shared this, I'm like, man, this is so good. This is what she said. She said, when you change your relationship with rejection, you change your entire life. The first thought I have when I fail at something is, listen to this, I am not enough. That was my current definition of rejection. And she said, when you're rejected thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, she said, you just have to realize you have to reframe it. You have to shift the way that you see rejection. And so this is what she said. She said, when you look at rejection, you have to have a new definition of rejection. This is what it is. 2 things. Rejection is God's protection. Let me say it again because we don't have it up here on the slides. I know some of you are taking notes. Rejection is God's protection. Listen to what God says in 2 Thessalonians 3. It says, but the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and guard you against the evil one. You didn't know it at the time. You just took it as rejection, and God says, no, I'm protecting you. I'm protecting you from something that I did not want in your life. I'm protecting you from something that you thought was good. You thought it was great. You thought it was everything that you hoped for. But I need to protect you from it because I have something better, or it would have been detrimental to you. Psalms 46 tells us this great truth. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. When we look at rejection no longer as something that someone says, you're not good enough, you're not whatever enough, and we say, God, I recognize that you're in control over all of it. And therefore, I'm going to trust you. Therefore, I'm going to keep my eyes on you. You're protecting me, God. That allows you to keep going. To be rejected that many times, man, you got to have a better, clearer, healthier definition of rejection. The second thing that she said is this. She talked a lot about her faith. She said, rejection is God's redirection. Rejection is God's redirection. Psalms 37, I love this Psalms. The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. Though they stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand. That day that it was announced that they sold to Revlon, she got a phone call. Guess who it was? It was that guy that said you're not attractive enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not the face enough of what we're looking for. She said, I answered the phone call. He said, hey, I want to tell you congratulations. She said, in that moment, I had 1.2 billion reasons to be mean, to say, in your face, sucker, to say all kinds of things. She said, but God spoke to me in that moment. He said, had you allowed them to invest in you, they would have taken a majority of your company. He said, I allowed you to experience the rejection because it was a redirection. I allowed you to experience the rejection because it was a redirection. Proverbs tells us this in Proverbs 16:9. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Come back to Moses as we conclude. Listen to what Acts says about Moses. In Acts 7, verse 35, it says, so God sent back the same man his people had previously rejected. God sent back the same person his people had previously rejected. Moses could go back because God had helped him overcome his rejection. He could go back because guess what? He was free from that rejection. He could go back because God said, I've healed you. I've broken you free from it. No longer is that rejection a point of your identity. No longer is that rejection who you are. Your identity is no longer found in it. It's found in me. Now think about this. God sends him back to a nation that's been in slavery for 400 years. Think about that just for a moment. 400 years of slavery. Slavery is one of the most evil, most inhumane things that any human being could ever do to another human being. It's dark. It's wrong. It's demonic. It's oppressive. But think about it. At its core, slavery is the ultimate form of rejection. It's saying that you're not a human. It's saying that you don't matter. It's saying that you have no dignity, that I'm going to own you. The people of Israel, they'd been living in that rejection for 400 years. And God said, I'm going to use a man who's been dealing with it for 40 years to now lead my people who've been dealing with for 400 years into freedom. Here's what you got to see. Not only does God help us overcome our rejection, but church, God uses our rejection to help other people overcome rejection. God's bringing you out of your rejection today. And God says it's not just for you to walk in this newfound freedom. It's to help other people find this freedom as well. It's to help other people experience what you've experienced. Listen to this. Again, Acts 7:35. So God sent the same man back his people had previously rejected when they demanded, "Who made you ruler over us?" Through the angel who appeared to him in the burning bush, God sent Moses to be their ruler and savior. And by means of many wonders and miraculous signs, he led them out of Egypt through the Red Sea and through the wilderness for 40 years. Overcoming rejection is one of the most powerful things that any human being can ever experience. It's one of the greatest breakthroughs that we can ever experience. But God says, I'm giving this to you as a gift to help other people, to free other people, to lead other people, to help them discover what you've discovered. Man, I'm so sorry to hear that you got fired from your job. You want to sit and just talk about it? I want to hear what you're going through. I want to hear what you're facing. I want to hear what you're experiencing. And if you want, I can tell you about a moment that I got fired and what helped me. I'm so sorry about your divorce right now. Man, I don't even imagine the pain and the loss that you're encountering. If you want, I'd love to walk this out with you. When you're ready to talk, we can talk. I'd love to even share some of the things that I went through, the things that helped me overcome that rejection as well. Here's what God wants to do today. God doesn't want to just help you reject your rejection. He wants to help redeem your rejection. Everything the enemy intended for evil, God says, I'm going to bring about for good. That rejection you're going through, I'm going to help heal it, but I'm going to also redeem it. I'm going to take it to a place that's beyond anything you could have ever imagined. You might not make $1.2 billion off that rejection, but man, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of freedom and joy and life and peace and everything that I am. Would you bow your heads with me today? God is so good.